Hello and welcome. Tonight we're going to take a gentle journeying look into a Cartoon Network classic that many of us remember with a shiver and a laugh. The grim adventures of Billy and Mandy. In this calming documentary-style exploration, we'll uncover why this bizarre cartoon about a dim-witted boy, a cynical girl, and a grim reaper himself wasn't really made for kids, at least not in the way you'd expect. Make yourself comfortable as we delve into the dark humor, hidden lore, and behind-the-scenes secrets of a show that straddled the line between childhood fun and something much more macabre. We'll move slowly and softly, touching on the show's origins and the creator's intent, the network's odd decisions, and even the subtle ways censorship, or the lack thereof, shaped Billy and Mandy's ghoulish world. We'll reflect on its major themes, from dark comedy and existential dread to sharp satire of children's media tropes, all delivered in a tone so hushed and thoughtful that you might just drift off to sleep, and that's okay. Along the way we'll ponder the psychological depth of the main characters, cheerful Billy, merciless Mandy, and poor Grim, and revisit some standout episodes like Little Rock of Horrors, Mandy the Merciless, Chocolate Sailor, and Keeper of the Reaper. These episodes, among others, pushed boundaries with stories of death, power, and control that went far beyond typical kids' fare. Finally, as we wander through this midnight garden of nostalgia, we'll whisper about the fan theories and internet discussions that have sprung up over the years. Ideas like Mandy being some cosmic entity, Grim as a prisoner of fate, or even the entire show representing a form of purgatory for its characters. Each theory adds another layer of mystique to a cartoon that already felt like much more than Saturday morning entertainment. So, let's begin our exploration. Close your eyes if you like, and imagine the quiet suburb of Endsville under a pale moon, where two children, and one very unlucky Grim Reaper, are about to show us why their adventures were never just for kids. The origins and the creator's vision. To understand how Billy and Mandy managed to be so dark and yet air on a kids' network, we should start at the beginning, how the show came to be. The journey starts with a young animator named Maxwell Atoms, real name Adam Burton, who had a penchant for mixing the spooky with the silly. In the early 2000s, Cartoon Network held a viewer poll event called the Big Pick. It was essentially a contest where new cartoon shorts competed for a series green light, and viewers could vote on their favorite. Subert, Maxwell Atoms, submitted a twisted little concept about two kids who literally win the Grim Reaper as their best friend in a limbo contest. This short, titled Meet the Reaper, introduced the world to optimistic dunce Billy, his cold-hearted friend Mandy, and Grim, the skull-faced embodiment of death, who loses a bet and becomes enslaved to them. The short was part of a showcase called Grim and Evil, paired with another Atoms creation, Evil Con Con, and thanks to fan votes it won the contest in 2000. Thus, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy officially premiered in 2001 as part of Grim and Evil, before becoming its own standalone series in 2003. It's interesting that Billy and Mandy, along with codename Kids Next Door, the following year's Big Pick winner, went on to outlast many other shows of the era. Clearly, there was something in this morbid little cartoon that resonated with audiences right from the start. Maxwell Atoms' creative vision for the show is key to understanding its tone. Atoms has explained that to him, Billy and Mandy was an exercise in laughing at childhood fears. Think about the classic scary things that keep kids up at night: the monster under the bed, the boogeyman in the closet, the personification of death coming to get you. Atoms took all those irrational childhood terrors and invited them to play, by turning the Grim Reaper into a beleaguered nanny figure and making monsters into punchlines. He was, in his own words, helping kids laugh at what scares them. The show's premise itself, two children literally bullying death into being their friend, is a humorous subversion of the fear of dying. If you can make the Grim Reaper into a goofy pal who does your chores, how scary can he really be? Atoms tapped into that vein of morbid humor deliberately. He grew up on horror movies and comedians who weren't afraid of taboo subjects, and it shows in Billy and Mandy's DNA. In interviews he's mentioned influences ranging from classic EC horror comics to absurdist humor, which combined into the show's unique gothic comedy atmosphere. What's remarkable is that Cartoon Network in the early 2000s gave a lot of freedom to creators like Atoms. He was only in his early 20s when he pitched Billy and Mandy, yet was trusted to run this oddball show largely on his own terms. Selber. In a recent reflection, Atoms noted that back then, TV animation was a smaller world. Executives were passionate about the medium, budgets were decent, and young artists could get a shot at making something weird and personal chore. That environment allowed him to imbue Billy and Mandy with a strong authorial voice. He envisioned a cartoon that looked kid-friendly on the surface, bright colors, slapstick antics, but which would also include layers of dark comedy and satire for older viewers. In many ways, he succeeded. The show's gothic aesthetic and twisted humor felt like nothing else on Cartoon Network at the time, except perhaps Courage the Cowardly Dog, another creepy comedy. Yet Billy and Mandy pushed the envelope even further in some respects, fully embracing references to death, the afterlife, and moral ambiguity, while still being, ostensibly, a children's show. Maxwell Atoms didn't set out to traumatize kids, of course. His goal was to entertain through subversion, to take typical kid show lessons and stand them on their head. For example, many episodes end with ironic or non-morals, like the characters not learning a lesson or things reverting to status quo through absurd means. He once joked in a Q&A that one of the few notes he got from higher-ups was to occasionally have the characters hug at the end of an episode, just to show a bit of heart, something he found amusing given how cynical Mandy is. By and large though, Atoms was allowed to indulge his taste for dark humor. In summary, the show's origin story and the creator's vision set the stage for why Billy and Mandy never felt like your typical kid's cartoon. It was literally created from a viewer's choice contest, giving it a bit of a rebellious start, and guided by a creator who wanted to help kids laugh at darkness rather than shy away from it. Selber. With Cartoon Network's blessing, Maxwell Atoms crafted a world where the scariest things imaginable were sources of comedy and adventure. This unconventional foundation explains a lot about why the series could be so unsettling and sophisticated at the same time. Before we move on, picture that foundation in your mind, a cartoon born from an experiment, led by a man who gleefully mixes the cute and the macabre. It's late at night in our discussion now, and the lights are dimming, which means it's the perfect time to peek behind the curtain of how the network handled this strange creation. Did the powers at Cartoon Network always understand what they had on their hands? And how did they react to a show that featured a hateful farting Grim Reaper, as one executive later called it? Let's softly transition into the next chapter, where we'll explore Cartoon Network's role, for better or worse, in enabling the not-so-kid-friendly antics of Billy and Mandy. Network decisions, censorship, and hateful fart cartoons. One of the most fascinating aspects of the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy is how much risque or morbid content it managed to slip into a children's programming block. Looking back, many of us are surprised. How did they get away with that? The answer lies partly in the climate of Cartoon Network at the time, and partly in a bit of luck or oversight when it came to censorship. Let's talk gently about the network side of things, without jolting anyone awake, and see what was going on behind the scenes. In the early 2000s, Cartoon Network was experimenting with edgier material. Shows like Johnny Bravo and Ed, Edd n Eddy had already proven that kids' cartoons could include jokes that flew over children's heads, but gave older viewers a chuckle. Billy and Mandy took this a step further into black comedy territory. According to Maxwell Atoms, the Standards and Practices Division, essentially the censors, mostly left them alone when it came to the show's dark humor. He once remarked that the rampant morbid jokes and gallows humor in Billy and Mandy usually passed without opposition, perhaps because the network executives didn't scrutinize it too closely. In his view, the show enjoyed a surprisingly lenient environment, where he could push boundaries, making the Grim Reaper wield cartoonish weapons, showing characters dying comically and coming back, and packing in horror movie references, all with minimal pushback. Why was that? One theory, half-jokingly suggested by Atoms, is that Cartoon Network's higher-ups might not have fully realized how dark the content was.
The series is so outlandish and surreal that a lot of its more disturbing elements were cloaked in absurdity. A brain-eating meteor singing a Broadway-style song, a character literally eating himself after turning to chocolate, children casually hanging out in the underworld. It's grotesque stuff, but presented in a zany, light-hearted cartoon way. The censors perhaps saw the exaggerated, goofy animation and assumed it was all innocuous fun, failing to notice the darker implications. As Atoms hinted, sometimes it felt like they got it past the goalie, sneaking in grim jokes, simply because nobody bothered to flag them. However, that doesn't mean Cartoon Network was completely hands-off. There were lines even Billy and Mandy couldn't cross on a kids' show. For example, explicit gore was avoided. Most of the violence is cartoonish or happens off-screen, and whenever truly occult or sensitive themes came up, the show handled them with humor rather than seriousness. Censorship by omission was a strategy. Rather than banning an episode outright, the network might request a minor edit or trust the team to self-regulate. And indeed, Maxwell Atoms and his writers were clever about couching mature themes in comedic packaging. For instance, when dealing with a topic like the apocalypse or existential dread, they'd usually undercut it with a joke at the last second, ensuring the tone stayed breezy. Still, by mid-2000s standards, Billy and Mandy was pushing the envelope. It featured a hero, Mandy, who never learned kindness or empathy, episodes that ended on downbeat or twisted notes, and frequent references to death and hell. This was hardly Care Bears. The network's unusual tolerance paid off in the show's popularity, but not everyone at Cartoon Network was pleased in retrospect. In fact, there's an infamous story that sheds light on how the higher executives really felt about Billy and Mandy's content. Years after the show had ended, Maxwell Atoms revealed that when Cartoon Network was undergoing a management change around 2007-2008, one senior executive essentially blamed Billy and Mandy for hurting the network's brand. He said, in an online Q&A, Atoms recalled being called out in front of colleagues and scolded over what was described as his hateful fart cartoon, a pretty harsh if oddly phrased critique. Said, the executive, Michael Owalene, felt that the gross-out humor and subversive tone of Billy and Mandy had ruined Cartoon Network's brand. He said, this dressing down was followed by Atoms' departure from the network shortly thereafter. Said, essentially, when a new wave of leadership came in, they were less amused by Grimm's misadventures. Cartoon Network was pivoting away from its older identity, and even experimenting with live-action CN Real, which happened around 2009, and shows like Billy and Mandy, with its flatulence jokes, dark satire, and lack of sentimental lessons, seemed to embarrass some of the execs who wanted a more traditional family-friendly image. It's ironic, because fans adored the show's irreverence, and today, Billy and Mandy is fondly remembered as one of Cartoon Network's classics. But at the time, the internal politics led to the series ending a bit abruptly. The final episode aired in late 2007, and a TV movie, Under Fist, Halloween Bash, in 2008, was meant to set up a spin-off, but that spin-off was quietly cancelled when Atoms and many others were let go during the network's restructuring. Atoms later clarified that he didn't take the firing personally. Cartoon Network was sweeping house, and even big names like Craig McCracken, Powerpuff Girls, and Jendy Tartakovsky, Samurai Jack were leaving around then. However, he did say he did take that public reprimand to heart. Being told your creation was a mistake for the company definitely stung Bill. So, what does this tell us? It highlights a tension at the core of Billy and Mandy's existence, a show ahead of its time, straddling the boundary between children's cartoon and something that would fit on adult animation blocks. For most of its run, it flew under the radar of censorship, benefiting from a permissive era and clever writing that masked the darkest content and humor. But eventually, the very things that made it special caused the higher-ups to get cold feet.
The dark themes wrapped in laughter, humor, satire, and existential dread. From its very premise, Billy and Mandy announced itself as a show unafraid of the dark. A lot of cartoons have spooky elements or Halloween episodes, but this series lived in the spooky and the macabre as its normal, yet it somehow remained hilarious and light-hearted. How? The secret is in how the show blended dark themes with comedy, using satire and absurdity as a sugarcoating for some fairly profound ideas. One of the biggest themes in Billy and Mandy is, of course, death. Not just as a character, Grimm, but as a concept. Death is present in every episode by virtue of Grimm's role, and the show constantly jokes about it, trivializes it, and pokes fun at the fear of it. In the world of Billy and Mandy, death is both omnipresent and no big deal. Characters can lose their souls, turn into the undead, or visit the afterlife, and it's all treated casually. This running gag serves a deeper purpose. It normalizes the idea of mortality for its audience in a way that's oddly comforting. When Billy pipes up with something naive like, "Look, it's Santa Claus," upon seeing Grimm, only for Mandy to retort, "That's not Santa, you stooge. That's the Grim Reaper." It's funny, but also telling. Mandy's utter lack of fear, in the face of the ultimate boogeyman, sets the tone. In this universe, the scary is mundane. The humor in Billy and Mandy is often described as black comedy or gallows humor. This means the show laughs about things that are typically serious or taboo, like dying, despair, or supernatural horror. For example, consider the episodes where the entire world is at stake. There are several apocalyptic scenarios across the series. Meteors poised to brainwash humanity, ancient demons trying to end the world, even Mandy nearly conquering Earth in a future vision. Each time, the impending doom is played for laughs, and usually averted, not by heroism, but by sheer absurdity or a joke. In one episode, an asteroid monster intends to eat everyone's brains and bring about a zombie apocalypse, only to be defeated when it samples Mandy's brain and finds it too spicy to handle. More on that in a bit. In another story, a Lovecraftian horror from the center of the earth is unleashed by Billy's stupidity, but ends up being subdued in a ridiculous way, leaving no lasting trauma, except maybe to the audience's psyche from laughing too hard. This comedic framing of apocalyptic and horrific events is a form of satire and commentary. The show seems to suggest that chaos and doom are always lurking, but perhaps the best, or only way to face them, is with a kind of resigned laughter. Notably, episodes often conclude with a return to status quo, even if wild things happened. This negative continuity, characters dying, and then being fine next episode, etc., isn't just a running joke. It almost implies a philosophical point, that in this world, nothing is permanent, not even death, so why be afraid? In a subtle way, that can be seen as existentially reassuring, or existentially dread-inducing, depending on how you take it. The universe of Billy and Mandy is chaotic and absurd, and the show revels in that. It tells kids, and adults, that the world can be random and scary, but it's better to laugh at the madness than to cower. Another major theme is the inversion of traditional morality found in children's shows. In most cartoons aimed at kids, you have clearly defined good guys who learn lessons, and bad guys who are defeated. Billy and Mandy gleefully upends that formula. Mandy, one of the protagonists, is arguably morally worse than many of the villains who show up. She is ruthless, never learns to be nicer, and often her plans, not the villains, drive the plot into dark territory. There are episodes where you might expect a lesson about humility or kindness, but instead Mandy's cold worldview prevails without consequence. For example, in Mistress of the Iron Star, a space adventure episode, it's Mandy's authoritarian tendencies that save the day, not any spirit of friendship. The show satirizes the very idea of didactic children's entertainment. It's as if Maxwell Atoms and his team were winking at the older viewers. We know this would normally be the part where the characters realize teamwork is good or lying is bad. But nope, not here. Mandy's refusal to conform to the usual good kid archetype is a statement in itself. It says that sometimes stories can just be weird and characters can be flawed, without a neat moral. This moral inversion fed into the satire of children's media that Billy and Mandy often performed. The show loved parody and past. One episode parodies Harry Potter, with Toadblatt's School of Sorcery, pointing out how absurd a magical school would be if you had someone like Mandy in it. She'd simply take over. Another episode, Billy and Mandy Save Christmas, twists the holiday special formula by making Santa a vampire and Mrs. Claus a ruthless vampire hunter,
a tongue-in-cheek jab at how saccharine Christmas specials usually are. Even the episode My Fair Mandy, which on the surface is a classic makeover for the big pageant story, ends in the most unorthodox way possible. Mandy smiles genuinely for once, and it literally causes cosmic shockwaves. Reality itself can't handle Mandy being happy and girly, and the scene cuts to black humorously as everyone screams. It's a brilliant parody of those teen movie tropes where the stoic girl learns to smile on stage. Billy and Mandy's answer is nope. In this world, Mandy smiling is the worst thing that could happen. That particular gag leads us to another deep theme, existential and cosmic horror lurking under the comedy. The show frequently alludes to forces beyond human understanding, drawing from H.P. Lovecraft's cosmic horror ideas, albeit in a comedic way. There are literal eldritch abominations in Billy and Mandy's universe. Billy at one point unleashes an ancient tentacled demon named Cthulhu, straight out of Lovecraft by reading from a forbidden tome, and chaos ensues. In Prank Call of Cthulhu, for instance, the creature Yog-Sothoth is referenced as Yog-Sothoth, eternal hunger, when Billy accidentally summons it with a prank phone call. However, rather than depicting these cosmic beings as purely terrifying, the show makes them petty, silly, or easily foiled by stupidity. That is a form of absurdist existentialism, the idea that the universe might be ruled by uncaring insane forces, which is scary, but also that our main characters are so absurd that they make those forces look foolish, which is fun. Billy's obliviousness often acts as a shield against cosmic horror. One might say that ignorance is bliss in the face of the abyss. Billy is too dim to be scared by monsters that would drive others mad, and so he can interact with them on a Looney Tunes level, undermining their menace. It's a humorous take on an otherwise bleak worldview. Maybe the only way to survive a crazy cosmos is to be a little crazy and naive yourself. Throughout the series we see themes of fate and free will pop up too, often through Grimm's predicament enslaved by the kids, or through time travel episodes that show predestined outcomes, like Mandy's tyrannical future in Mandy the Merciless. We'll talk more about those with specific episodes and characters, but suffice to say, even philosophically weighty questions get some airtime under all the jokes. It's striking how the show can make a child laugh with a fart joke one minute, and then subtly hint at the fragility of human existence the next. For instance, the episode Lights Camera Danger features a film director character who tries to trap the kids in a deadly movie. It's a satire of Hollywood, sure, but it also has Grimm utter a line about how he's reaped countless souls of the vain and foolish chasing fame. A line that lightly brushes on the idea of wasted lives. Moments like that likely flew over kids' heads, but they register to adult fans rewatching now. There's a layer of melancholy or cynicism under some of the humor, reflecting that Maxwell Atoms was also writing to amuse himself and his colleagues, not just children. In a gentle voice, let's acknowledge that existential dread truly is a part of the show's fabric, but handled in a very accessible way. The dread is mostly for Grimm, who often sighs about the meaninglessness of his new life cleaning up after kids, or for the world, which is always on the brink of absurd destruction. But the reason it's not nightmare-inducing for kids is that the show's tone reassures you not to take any of it too seriously. The unspoken message is yes, the world can be scary and weird, but if a boneheaded kid and a deadpan girl can handle it, so can you. Each time a monster is defeated by something dumb or random, it's like the show is mockingly saying to fear itself, is that all you've got? Additionally, Billy and Mandy uses satire in children's media as a mirror to society. Characters like General Scar, imported from the more overtly parodic Evil Con, bring in jokes about war and dictators in a format kids can giggle at. Scar becomes a suburban gardener, lampooning the idea of a villain trying to retire peacefully. The absurd lengths to which characters go for petty reasons, like mind-controlling people for a school election, or literally stealing the literal devil's apple pie recipe. Yes, that happens in one episode. Reflect real human follies in a funhouse mirror. In summary, the themes of the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy are a rich tapestry of darkness and humor interwoven. The show deals with death, fear, chaos, and power, but always undercuts heavy moments with levity. It satirizes both the scary things in life and the way cartoons traditionally talk about them. The result is a show that can be enjoyed as simple goofy entertainment by a child, but also analyzed as a tongue-in-cheek commentary on deeper issues by an adult. This dual nature is precisely why it might not have truly been for kids, at least not solely.
It was for all ages, perhaps even more for those who could appreciate the darkness it was shedding light on. As you listen, maybe you're recalling some episodes that exemplify these points. Let's gently guide our journey toward those specific stories, the standout episodes that fans often cite when they talk about how Billy and Mandy wasn't your average children's show. In the next section, we'll slow down even further and walk through a few key episodes, examining their plots and the underlying meanings that make them so memorable, and in some cases quite unnerving for a kid's cartoon. Close your eyes if you wish, and picture the scenes as we describe them. We'll be your narrator through these grim and giggle-worthy tales.
Peering into the episodes, when the show went deliciously dark, let's now explore some standout episodes of the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy, the ones that have become legendary among fans for their bold themes and memorable moments. Each of these episodes illustrates why the series wasn't your typical kids' fare. We'll go through them one by one, with a soft spotlight on their plots and subtext, almost like recalling a dream or a bedtime story that's a little twisted but fascinating. Little Rock of Horrors, Brains, Loneliness, and Mandy's Terror. One of the early episodes that set the tone is Little Rock of Horrors. Even the title, a play on the musical Little Shop of Horrors, signals the mix of pop culture parody and horror that the show loves. The story begins on a lonely night, with Billy feeling bored and neglected. Mandy is too busy reading to play with him, and even Grim doesn't want to entertain Billy's nonsense. Feeling utterly alone, Billy does something many kids might do. He wishes on a star for a friend, but because this is Billy, and this is Grim Adventures, that wish goes horribly awry, in the most amusing way. The star that falls into Billy's backyard is actually a sentient brain-eating meteor from outer space. Sentient brain-eating meteor from outer space. This creature, which promptly bursts into a jaunty song called Brains, asks Billy to bring it brainy victims to eat. Being simple-minded and eager to please, Billy obliges. He lures his friend Erwin over to become the meteor's first meal. It's a dark premise. Our protagonist is effectively serving his pals to a monster just because he's lonely. The meteor, with a deep throaty croon, gobbles Erwin's brain and grows in power, then demands more. Soon, a good chunk of the town of Endsville is zombified, brainless, and under the meteor's control, all off-screen, but understood by the audience. Here's where Mandy comes in, and where the episode cements her status as more than just an ordinary little girl. Mandy encounters the meteor when it's large and in charge, and it tries to eat her brain as the grand finale of its feast. However, something incredible happens. The alien meteor melts down after tasting Mandy's brain, exclaiming that it's too spicy. Sentient. The implication is hilarious and telling. Mandy's mind is so evil, so caustic, that even a cosmic horror can't stomach it. She literally fries the brain eater from the inside with her sheer Mandiness. Then, in a final dark twist, Mandy herself takes on the meteor's form, a gooey, monstrous shape, and turns to Billy with a menacing request. "I'm feeling hungry. Billy, could you bring me some brains?" Sentient. The episode ends on that note, a perfect little horror comedy punchline. So what's the deeper meaning? Little Rock of Horrors is a case study in loneliness and temptation, showing how Billy's desperation for a friend leads him to make a deal with a metaphorical devil, the meteor. It's a satire of those be careful what you wish for stories. Usually, a kid wishing on a star in a cartoon might get a lesson about appreciating what they have. Billy instead gets a singing parasite that almost destroys the town. The resolution doesn't come from Billy learning better. It comes from Mandy being so terrifyingly herself that she accidentally saves the day, and then possibly becomes an even worse threat. This episode exemplifies how Mandy is portrayed as a kind of ultimate fear. She is scarier than the monsters. For a kid's show, that's unusual. Typically the human children are weaker than the supernatural foe. Here Mandy is the apex predator of fear. Fans often cite this ending as evidence for the theory that Mandy is not entirely human, or is some cosmic entity in a child's form, because what normal brain would be poisonous to an alien? Indeed, Grimm himself throughout the series remarks, he's never met anyone like Mandy. With a shudder, Sentient will revisit that idea in the fan theory section, but file it away.
This episode is one of the first hints at Mandy's unnaturally powerful aura in a relaxed storytelling tone. Imagine that scene of the meteor melting. It's gross and funny, and you might have laughed as a kid without pondering it much. But thinking back, it almost sends a tiny chill. The real monster of the episode turned out to be our young anti-heroine. Little Rock of Horrors encapsulates the show's essence, a macabre concept brain-eating monster, delivered with humor. The monster sings, and is bested comically, and an outcome that replaces a tidy moral with a dark joke, Mandy potentially becoming the monster. This definitely wasn't standard Saturday morning fare.
Mandy the Merciless, a glimpse of absolute power. Next, let's talk about Mandy the Merciless. This episode is often highlighted for how it dives into science fiction dystopia and heavy parody, all within a 7-minute cartoon segment. It serves as both a spoof of Frank Herbert's Dune saga, Tuva, and a character study of Mandy taken to her extreme. The setup is that one lazy afternoon, the trio Billy, Mandy, Grimm, plus Irwin, decide to look into the future for fun. Tuva, Grimm, being an otherworldly being, presumably has the means to show possible futures via a crystal ball. What they see is a timeline where Mandy rules the earth as an immortal, half-worm, half-human tyrant. Tuva, yes, you heard right. In the future, Mandy has somehow become an immortal worm-human hybrid, a direct parody of the character Leto the, from God, Emperor of Dune, who transforms into a giant worm. In that novel, Tuva, she is called Mandy the Merciless, and she absolutely dominates the planet. This future Mandy keeps Grimm by her side as an advisor and still as her friend, though clearly he's more like a servant. Even then, Tuva, Billy, meanwhile, is long gone, sort of. Mandy has a collection of Billy clones that serve as jester-like companions to amuse her through the eons. It's both funny and deeply unsettling to see hordes of Billys with numbers on their shirts, each as idiotic as the original, bouncing around to entertain Empress Mandy. Irwin in the future has become some kind of cyborg servant as well. The world is a dystopia under Mandy's iron and wormy fist, and she maintains control through the supply of cinnamon, which in this parody stands in for the spice from Dune. Spice, in Dune, is a substance that grants power and extended life. Here cinnamon, amusingly, is Mandy's source of immortality and is treated as ultra-valuable. Tuva, Mandy hoards the world's cinnamon, and it has made her eternal and all-powerful. The detail that cinnamon, in her world functions exactly like the spice, even smelling like it, is a nerdy joke. But it also symbolizes control. Cinnamon is a simple household spice, mundane in our world, but in Mandy's future, it's the key to the global economy and power structure. Trust Mandy to weaponize even something as homey. The conflict in that future vision comes when Grimm, retaining a shred of his old self, dissolve a rebellion against Mandy. Tuva, he recruits a version of Billy, or a clone of Billy designated as the rebel, and others to rise up. Mandy, sly as ever, allows this rebellion to ferment, so she can crush it dramatically. She even feeds the rebels false information about her weakness. She pretends that she, as a half-worm, could be defeated by frogs, an allusion to the idea that Dune's god, Emperor Leto Duan, was vulnerable to water. It's a trap. When the rebels strike, she's utterly prepared and laughs off their attempt. In a reveal played partly for comedy, it turns out Mandy knew about the rebellion because, in the present, she was watching everything through the crystal ball, along with our hero's world. So essentially, future Mandy was aware she was being observed by present Mandy. This is a humorous paradox that again underscores Mandy's near omniscience. The segment ends with present Mandy smirking, having seen proof that her destiny is to conquer the world. Billy is understandably horrified by the idea that Mandy will rule forever, but Mandy herself not content, or at least unsurprised, to learn this fate. Mandy the Merciless stands out because it gives us a full-blown dystopian science fiction story in miniature, with loads of references that mostly unadults would catch. Dune, Star Wars,
Note the clone number 3187 reference to Leia's cell number Satire. The episode's theme is power corrupting absolutely, or rather revealing that Mandy is already absolutely corrupt and powerful, given the chance. It's essentially Mandy's character taken to its logical conclusion. If a child with her personality grew up and had unlimited power, the result would be an immortal tyrant. That's a very heavy idea to slip into a Cartoon Network show. Kids might just see a cool future adventure with robots and an evil Mandy. Older viewers see a satire of dictatorship and a cautionary tale. Another layer here is fate versus free will. Mandy sees a vision that she will become this merciless ruler. Does that lock in her fate? Typically in stories, seeing an evil future might spur a character to change to avoid that outcome. But knowing Mandy, she might instead be motivated by it. It validates her belief that might makes right and that caring is for the weak. The episode doesn't spell it out, but it leaves a slightly eerie feeling that Mandy's path is set, and she's fine with it. It's also a rare occasion where we see Grimm actively opposing Mandy, albeit a future Mandy for moral reasons. In the present, Grimm is too beaten down to resist her much, but apparently centuries of servitude might finally push him to rebel. This hints at Grimm's own arc of never giving up hope to be free, a tragic thread hidden under comedy. For a child viewer, the biggest takeaway might just be the spectacle of evil future Mandy, and all the gags like Billy clones. But soak in the concept. An episode of a kid's cartoon basically did a mini 1984 or Brave New World scenario. That's pretty audacious, and it's done with such style, a dry matter-of-fact presentation, as if to say, of course Mandy takes over the world, what else did you expect? The calm tone of the narration and characters in that future Mandy speaks very serenely, as a ruler, oddly matches our calm storytelling here tonight, even though the content is dark. It's a perfect example of how Billy and Mandy could explore philosophical sci-fi themes in a digestible, even funny way.
Chocolate Sailor, a darkly sweet parable of gluttony. Now let's move to a fan-favorite episode that is both gross and memorable. Chocolate Sailor. This one veers into a different kind of dark territory, not cosmic horror or tyranny, but a cautionary tale about gluttony, addiction, and maybe even consumer culture, and it does so with one of the most grotesquely funny sequences in the show. The plot kicks off innocently enough at a flea market, where Billy feels sad that he has no money to buy trinkets. Xavier, Grimm, cleaning out his own junk, hands Billy a spare comic book to pacify him. Xavier, this comic book turns out to have an advertisement that catches Billy's eye, an ad for Chocolate Sailor chocolates, which promises kids they can earn prizes or money by selling chocolates door to door. It's basically a parody of those real-life school fundraisers or multi-level marketing schemes, with a seafaring twist. Billy, being Billy, sees only one thing: chocolate. He signs up immediately, and a starter kit magically arrives, likely through some supernatural means, as the Chocolate Sailor brand is not normal, which we soon find out. Soon, as Billy gets the first box of chocolate bars, his addiction kicks in. He cannot resist eating the product he's supposed to sell. Xavier. The episodes then becomes a comedic portrayal of binge eating as horror. Billy devours the entire box, and instead of stopping, he keeps reordering more because he's hooked on the taste. Xavier. We watch as he descends into a true chocolate frenzy. He sneaks and hoards chocolate, tries to sell some to Mandy and Grimm, but immediately reneges and eats those too, and accumulates a massive debt in the process. Xavier. This is played for laughs, but it's also an exaggerated picture of childhood impulsiveness, and how clever Metin can exploit it. The Chocolate Sailor Company essentially wants kids like Billy, who will sell the chocolate by buying it all themselves in an uncontrollable urge. There's a satirical nod here to how companies hook people, especially children, on sugary products, a sly montier beneath the humor. As Billy continues gorging, the Chocolate Sailor, himself, an actual character, who is a living chocolate sailor, is watching the sales numbers. When he sees that one boy in Endsville, Billy, has ordered 10,000 units of chocolate, he is delighted. His nefarious plan is revealed. He intends to turn the entire town of Endsville into chocolate sailors, like himself, presumably as thralls or chocolate-based life forms. And indeed, the consequence of Billy's overindulgence is that Billy turns into solid chocolate. We witness a rather disturbing transformation where Billy's skin becomes chocolate, and then in classic Billy fashion, he starts eating himself because, well, he's made of chocolate, and he can't help it. Shiva, this is dark comedy. At its peak, a child character is effectively cannibalizing his own body, though it's chocolate, out of pure gluttony. It's the kind of imagery that's funny in a grotesque way and a bit shocking when you realize what you're seeing. Many a viewer has remembered the sight of Chocolate Billy taking a bite out of his own hand, with equal parts laughter and ew. Mandy and Grim, alarmed that Billy will literally consume himself into nothingness, intervene. They board the Chocolate Sailor's ship, a fantastical galleon where everything is made of chocolate, to demand antidote to save Billy's A. The Chocolate Sailor, a portly man entirely made of chocolate, initially refuses, seeing Billy as the perfect customer-turned-product. That is, until Billy, now a nearly manless chocolate-craving creature, reduced to just a chocolate head because he's eaten the rest of his body, hops after the sailor, and tries to take a bite out of him to save her. Suddenly the tables are turned, the predator becomes prey. The sailor panics when Billy bites his finger, and he quickly offers Billy a chance to win the antidote via a game. 4 enchanted chocolates are presented, known one of which contains the antidote. The others have nasty magical effects, like mutating marshmallow and caustic caramel cream. Fun alliterative dangers. In true Billy fashion, he doesn't even consider the rules and just eats all 4 chocolates at once. Deva. This causes a chaotic reaction. Billy explodes into a gooey flood of liquid chocolate that engulfs the entire ship. Vente Sipsova. It's a messy, Willy Wonka gone wrong finale. The next and final scene is a quiet epilogue. Back home, Mandy actually expresses that she misses having Billy around, perhaps the one rare hint that she cares about the buffoon Tov, while Grim says maybe Billy is in a better place now. We then see what that means. They're casually eating sundaes with chocolate syrup, and the syrup bottle's label has Billy's face on it. Sova, Billy has literally been bottled as chocolate sauce, a darkly comic punishment indeed. Chocolate Sailor works on a few levels. As a gross-out comedy, it's very effective. Kids laugh at how silly Billy acts and the over-the-top way she explodes into chocolate. As a fable about excess, it's surprisingly pointed. Billy's lack of self-control leads him to a fate where he loses his humanity, becoming chocolate, and nearly annihilates himself. It's a bit like a Grimm's fairy tale, pun intended, given Grimm is there about gluttony. You could even see echoes of the story of Pleasure Island in Pinocchio, where kids turn into donkeys when they indulge too much, except here it's turning into chocolate. The lesson is stealthy but present. Moderation matters, and beware of deals that seem too sweet to be true. Of course Billy himself learns nothing. He's not even really conscious by the end, and Mandy and Grim suffer no consequences except dealing with a Billy syrup bottle. That lack of a clear moral resolution keeps it comedic rather than preachy. Also, on a satirical note, the episode jabs at capitalist greed and pyramid schemes. The Chocolate Sailor Company is clearly taking advantage of kids, turning them effectively into commodities. It's quite a cynical portrayal of a business, literally consuming its consumers. For an adult viewer, this is a sharp little monitor on things like youth marketing or get-rich-quick schemes. For a kid, it's just don't eat too much candy, or you might turn into one, which is funny, and a tad cautionary health-wise. This episode is one of the reasons people say the show wasn't purely for kids. It's fairly nightmare-inducing conceptually. Imagine feeling so addicted you'd eat your own fingers if they were chocolate. That's body horror masked in comedy. It's also a morality tale without the morality part hammered in. There's no character at the end saying, "I've learned my lesson." Instead, it's a dry, ironic outcome. Billy's literally spread thin for others to enjoy as a topping. Mandy and Grimm's nonchalant final scene, treating Billy's fate as an inconvenience, past the Billy syrup, pleases pure dark comedy. It might leave an attentive viewer thinking, wow, that was kind of messed up, even as they snicker. And indeed, discussions online often bring up Chocolate Sailor as an example of how far the show would go with its humor. Keeper of the Reaper, a trial over death and friendship. Finally, let's look at Keeper of the Reaper. This episode is a double-length special, about 22 minutes, whereas most segments are approximately 11 minutes, and it cleverly uses a courtroom setting to explore the relationships between our main trio, particularly the tug-of-war over Grimm's ownership. It's packed with humor, especially thanks to a fan-favorite character, Fred Fredberger, who we'll get to, but it also has a core theme of attachment and control. The premise is that Billy's family is moving out of town due to his dad Harold getting a job transfer. Naturally, Billy assumes Grimm is coming with him. After all, Grimm has been living in the household as their supernatural friend servant for ages. But Mandy has other ideas. She immediately asserts that she should keep Grimm, and Billy shouldn't be allowed to take him away. This triggers a childish fight between Billy and Mandy over who gets to have Grimm. It's absurd on one level, treating a person, albeit the Grim Reaper, as a possession, but it also speaks to the weird bonds they've formed. Billy genuinely loves Grimm as a friend pet, while Mandy values Grimm as a tool, and perhaps also as her friend in her own unemotional way. Grimm himself, hilariously, isn't exactly thrilled to belong to either of them, but the thought of being fought over flatters him a bit. In one scene, you can see Grimm almost hopeful that maybe they care about him. Since they can't resolve it peacefully, Grimm suggests they settle the matter in underworld court. This kicks off the main part of the episode, a supernatural courtroom drama titled, with a grand booming voice, Keeper of the Reaper. The judge is a demon judge named Roy Spleen, and a jury of monsters and oddballs is assembled. What follows is both a parody of courtroom TV shows and a crossover cameo fest. Various supporting characters are called as witnesses to testify who deserves custody of Grimm's server. We see Irwin, Billy's parents, Mindy the local snobby girl, even characters from Evil Con and Scooby-Doo. They're making silly appearances at Burr. Each witness provides comedic anecdotes that highlight how awful or irresponsible Billy and Mandy can be. For instance, Billy's spider-son friend Jeff testifies how Mandy is mean, while another might point out Billy's idiocy causing havoc. Amidst the trial, the comedic scene stealer is Fred Fredberger, a green, dim-witted demon juror, who repeatedly interrupts the proceedings with inane comments. "Yes, I do. Yes," is his catchphrase. Dull. Fred's antics drive the judge insane and provide a lot of the levity, but the heart of the episode lies in what the verdict will be. On paper, it's a simple custody battle. Who keeps Grimm? In the climax, Judge Spleen asks the jury to vote between Billy or Mandy Server. Things get chaotic. One juror literally eats another, causing a complication in the vote. And it comes down to Fred Fredberger, so the tiebreaker's over. When pressed if he votes for Billy or Mandy, Fred cheerfully says, This confuses everyone, until the judge has an epiphany. Fred's simple affirmative means he believes neither should lose Grimm, that separating the trio would destroy their friendship, which is their most personal treasures. In a rare moment of earnestness, this realization makes everyone in the court, even the tough judge, tear up emotionally. It's a surprisingly sweet sentiment emerging from the chaos. Billy, Mandy, and Grimm, dysfunctional as they are, belong together. Their friendship, bizarre and abusive though it may be, actually holds them all together. As a resolution, Judge Spleen orders that Billy's family must not move after all, essentially placing them under house arrest in Endsville so that Billy and Mandy will both continue to have Grimm in their lives. The final scene shows Billy's house literally half destroyed from an earlier comedic rampage, and being guarded by an underworld cop to ensure they don't leave. Billy's wear an ankle monitor that will alarm if he steps out of town. It's an over-the-top solution that is both funny and strangely heartwarming. The status quo is preserved by supernatural court order. This episode encapsulates the theme of attachment versus ownership. For much of the series, Mandy has treated Grimm as property,
a slave bound by the friendship contract. Billy, on the other hand, treats Grim more like a pet or buddy, but still somewhat possessively. My best friend is Grim, kind of attitude. Grim is the rope in their tug of war. Keeper of the Reaper forces everyone to confront what Grim truly means to Dim. The outcome, with Fred's innocent wisdom, suggests that beyond the power plays, there is a real, if unorthodox, friendship binding Grim to these kids. The fact that everyone cries at the thought of breaking up the trio, even Mandy perhaps wipes a tear in a split second, we might imagine, is a rare sentimental beat. But true to the show, they don't dwell on it or turn it into a typical Olv lesson. It's immediately followed by a comedic punishment, house arrest, as if to laugh at its own sappiness. Nevertheless, the emotional truth peeks through. Mandy and Billy don't want to lose Grim, because in their own ways they love him, or need him. Grim fights to be free all the time, but when faced with leaving, he also seems conflicted. He doesn't protest the verdict, perhaps meaning he too has grown fond of his life with them, as crazy as it is. It's a subtle acknowledgement that this weird friendship is real, an anchor for all three of these characters in a world of chaos, and that's actually a deep idea. Even in a show full of nihilism and dark humor, connection matters. It may be twisted, they literally have to legally forbid Billy's family from relocating, but it's connection nonetheless. From a kid's perspective, Keeper of the Reaper is fun because it brings many characters together and has slapstick humor in a court setting, something novel compared to everyday school plots. For an older viewer, it's enjoyable as a parody of courtroom dramas and also touching for the reasons we discussed. It's one of the few episodes where you come away feeling a bit of warmth amidst the darkness, albeit delivered with a wink. In context of Not for Kids, this episode shows how Billy and Mandy could handle character complexity and conflict in a more sophisticated way. Instead of a straightforward lesson, we get a roundabout resolution that's half sentimental, half satirical. The idea of literally taking your custody battle to a demonic court is also pretty out there for a children's show concept. And Fred Burger's absurd humor, like asking mid-trial if there are nachos, or needing a bathroom break, is the kind of offbeat comedic timing that appeals to adults who recognize the absurdism, possibly more than kids who might just giggle at the funny green guy. As we recount these episodes softly in your ear, you might notice a pattern. The episodes we chose each highlight a different angle of the show's dark side: horror, Little Rock of Horrors; dystopian sci-fi, Mandy the Merciless; gross morality tale, Chocolate Sailor; and psychological comedy, Keeper of the Reaper. And there are many more we could talk about. Billy and Mandy Save Christmas, where the heroes have to cure a vampiric Santa, playfully mixing holiday cheer with horror tropes. My Fair Mandy, which we mentioned, showing that Mandy's smile can literally unravel reality itself. Billy and Mandy's Big Boogie Adventure, a TV movie, where the boogeyman himself tries to usurp Grim's job, dealing with themes of fear and legacy. The list goes on. Each time the show managed to be cleverer and darker than one would expect, which is why these episodes stick in the mind years later. They weren't scary in a traditional sense, they were aired to kids after all, but they had a way of unsettling you just a touch, or making you ponder something deep under the laughs. If you're still awake with us, you might be feeling a mix of nostalgia and newfound appreciation, seeing how these colorful cartoons contain such a range of influences and messages. Now, as our journey nears its end, let's address some of the intriguing fan theories and discussions that have emerged from all these rich details. Fans often picked up on the threads left by episodes like we described, and wove their own imaginative explanations. In our final stretch, we'll quietly delve into those fan theories, about Mandy's true nature, Grim's punishment, and the notion of the show's setting being something far more metaphysical than a regular suburban town. Keep relaxed, this is the conspiratorial campfire portion of our night, where we muse about possibilities in whispers.
Fan theories and internet lore. The myths behind the macabre. Over the years, the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy has inspired a plethora of fan theories, some playful, some eerie, that attempt to explain the show's strangest elements or imagine a deeper lore connecting its events. These theories circulate in internet discussions, YouTube video essays, and late-night Reddit threads, showing just how much this kids' show captured the imaginations of those who grew up with it. In this gentle segment, let's explore a few of the most popular fan theories. We'll present them as intriguing possibilities, not facts. Part of the fun is that the show never officially confirms these, leaving room for our own dreamy interpretations. Mandy, more than human. Perhaps the most common theory concerns Mandy herself. Fans have long speculated that Mandy isn't just an unusually mean little girl, but something far more cosmic and sinister. There are multiple angles to this theory, but they all agree Mandy's power is not natural. For example, one fan hypothesis posits that Mandy might represent nihilism incarnate, or even death itself in human form. This would explain her cold demeanor, lack of fear, and the almost supernatural influence she has over Grimm. We saw in episodes like Little Rock of Horrors that Mandy's mind could melt a monster, Sufi, and in My Fair Mandy, that her smile literally broke the fabric of reality for a moment. These aren't things a normal 9-year-old can do. Some fans tongue-in-cheek suggest Mandy is a cosmic constant, the embodiment of darkness, to balance Billy's embodiment of idiocy. A wild theory on a fan forum humorously claimed that if Mandy ever truly felt love or friendship, the universe might implode, because that goes against her nature. That's a bit exaggerated, but it captures how untouchable Mandy seems. Even Grimm, an ancient entity, is wary of her. In fact, as noted earlier, Grimm occasionally remarks he's never met anyone like Mandy in all his eons. Maxwell Adams himself seeded this idea by showing how Mandy can tame and intimidate the Grim Reaper so thoroughly, something no one else in the world of the show can do. Particularly colorful fan theory draws a parallel between Mandy and a famous anime character, Haruhi Suzumiya, a godlike schoolgirl unaware of her powers. It dubs Mandy the unaware ultimate evil of the multiverse. In essence, Mandy could bend reality to her will subconsciously. It's presented humorously in the theory, comparing her to various cosmic comic book beings. But when you look at episodes where reality warps around her, again, that pageant smile event, you start to wonder. The show never says Mandy is anything but human, but it leaves a trail of evidence that she's at least extraordinary. One might recall the episode where she becomes the all-powerful Queen Mandy. In another dimension, when she takes a certain artifact, she immediately molds an entire dimension to her whims. She gives it up at the end for the status quo, but that display hinted that given opportunity or realization, Mandy could be unstoppable. Another small detail fueling Mandy theories: she never laughs, except once evilly, and rarely smiles. In fiction, especially cartoons, laughter and smiling are signs of humanity and soul. Mandy's perpetual scowl could symbolize that she lacks some fundamental human warmth, as if she's an entity only masquerading as a child. And when she did smile, genuinely, as the judges demanded in My Fair Mandy, the supernatural fallout suggested nature itself rejected that changed soul. Fans often joke, Mandy must keep frowning, or reality falls apart. That's essentially treating her mood as a linchpin for the cosmos, a humorous exaggeration, but within the show's logic, not entirely off base. So, is Mandy a cosmic entity? The creators never confirmed it outright, but they've hinted that something's up with her. Word of God from Maxwell Adams is simply that Mandy is exceptionally strong-willed, and basically the scariest being in that world by personality alone. Whether that translates to literal cosmic power is left to our imaginations, but it's a fun theory to entertain as you rewatch the series. Mandy as the true Grim Reaper, or an avatar of darkness, and Grimm as almost her servant, despite the formal arrangement being the other way around. It certainly flips the dynamic that we usually expect, children afraid of monsters, completely on its head, in Billy and Mandy. Monsters fear a child, Grimm, a prisoner of fate and self-punishment. Another focal point for theorizing is Grimm. The show's premise already has Grimm bound by a contract. He lost that limbo contest, and has to be Billy and Mandy's best friend forever, the most dreaded phrase for him as per the bet. But fans have dug deeper, suggesting that Grimm's servitude might be more than a mere bet. It could be a cosmic punishment, or fate beyond his control, or even one of his own making. One theory posits that Grimm allows himself to remain captive because he secretly feels he deserves it. In other words, the humiliation he endures is a kind of penance. Why would the Grim Reaper need penance? Perhaps for eons of reaping souls without empathy, or maybe for a specific failure, like losing to 2 kids, an embarrassment he must live with. There's an episode where we see the Reaper bureaucracy and his old colleagues mock him for being enslaved. Grimm is ashamed. Some fans theorize that Grimm's pride caused him to agree to that ridiculous contest in the first place. He could have just reaped the hamster and ignored the kids, but they goaded him and he pridefully accepted. Losing stripped him of his dignity, and maybe he thinks until he gains it back honorably, he must serve the terms. This is reading in a lot, but it gives Grimm a tragic, almost noble dimension. He could be capable of escaping. He is death after all, but chooses to stick it out, due to a sense of duty, oddly enough. Another theory extension is that Grimm, being an immortal embodiment, might actually care for Billy and Mandy deep down, so he stays for their sake as much as for the contract. Yet he can't admit that because it's against his character image. This is supported by episodes like Keeper of the Reaper, where Grimm looks almost happy that they want him, and devastated when it seems he might be taken away. There's also the notion of negative continuity in the show being explained by Grimm's role. Fans note how characters can die or be harmed one episode and be fine the next. One theory suggests that Grimm is obligated to keep Billy and Mandy alive forever because they are his masters, and thus every time they or their friends die in an episode, Grimm quietly resurrects them or reverses it off-screen to maintain the status quo. This is a clever way to rationalize cartoon logic. Grimm is literally resetting things, bound by the contract to be their friend forever. If Billy or Mandy died permanently, the contract would break, so maybe cosmic forces or Grimm's own magic undo such events. It's a bit meta, but fun to think about. It casts Grimm as a prisoner of time too, forced to loop events to ensure his servitude continues indefinitely. That's almost Twilight Zone-ish when you ponder it. Death, who normally ends lives, is instead stuck preserving 2 lives eternally. Additionally, the show hints at Grimm's past before meeting the kids. He had a reputation, a purpose, and a sense of pride in being the Grim Reaper. Some fans speculate about how being chained to Billy and Mandy might have affected the world. Is the rest of the world now effectively immortal or weird because Grimm isn't doing his usual reaping rounds? The show occasionally shows other Grim Reapers or replacement Reapers, so maybe not, but it's a fun idea that by trapping death, Billy and Mandy sort of broke the natural order, which could explain why Endsville is so bizarre, monsters running around freely, etc., because Death's schedule got messed up. While these theories are more extrapolation than evidence-based, the imagery of Grimm in chains is literal in the intro of the show. The opening theme shows Grimm bound by chains being dragged by Billy and Mandy. It's symbolic but also literal to the story. Fans have taken that to heart, often feeling sympathy for Grimm. He's a comedic character, but the concept of death being a slave is a profound and sad one. If you stop to think, it resonates with the idea of a powerful person stuck in a mundane or demeaning job, a feeling many adults can relate to.
which might be why older viewers empathize with Grimm's plight. In summary, fan lore paints Grimm as possibly a self-imposed prisoner, one who might be choosing to endure torment, either out of guilt, hidden affection, or because of magical constraints we aren't fully privy to. It's an interesting reversal. Usually humans are prisoners of fate to death. Here death is prisoner to humans, maybe because fate has a sense of humor.
The Purgatory theory. Is Endsville the afterlife? Finally, we come to a broader theory that encompasses the entire premise, the idea that the characters are in purgatory or some kind of afterlife scenario. This is a theory fans of many cartoons toss around. There's an infamous one about Ed and Eddie, all being dead kids in purgatory, for example. But Billy and Mandy almost invites it more than usual because of its overt use of the afterlife imagery and dark tone. One version of the theory suggests that Billy and Mandy actually died as children, perhaps in that first episode's limbo game, and that their whole life in Endsville with Grimm is a form of limbo or purgatory where they've befriended death. Jova. Endsville, notably, contains the word end, a subtle cue that it might be where things end up. Fans on forums have mused that Endsville is a halfway realm between life and the afterlife. Jova. The fact that the town is full of monsters, undead, and supernatural occurrences without the wider world seeming to care could indicate it's not the real world at all, but a sort of sandbox afterlife just for these characters. Within this theory, Grimm's presence is symbolic. He's there to escort souls, but Billy and Mandy effectively won a stalemate with death, so now they hang out together in this limbo until what? Perhaps until these kids learn something or move on, which, given Mandy's stubbornness and Billy's obliviousness, might be never. It's a whimsically morbid thought that the series is an eternal loop of purgatory hijinks. Another angle, maybe everyone in the show is dead, or unreal in some sense. That would explain why crazy things happen and reset. Nobody ages, nobody questions the weirdness too deeply. The parents are caricatures. If you watch the show with this in mind, Endsville does feel oddly removed from reality. It's always shown as kind of a one-town universe, rarely referencing a larger normal Earth outside its borders. The only time we see other locales, they are equally bizarre, like a underworld or mystical realms, so you can almost accept the idea that Endsville equals purgatory playground. Of course, a simpler version of the theory is just that the show itself is metaphorically a purgatory, where Billy and Mandy have trapped Grimm. Grimm is in his own personal purgatory, having to serve kids. The kids are in theirs, dealing with supernatural chaos. No one can escape this town of endless episodic misadventures. The Hard Times, a satirical site, jokingly encapsulated fan theories in general with a headline like "They're actually in purgatory," reports every fan theory server, which shows how popular this line of speculation is across media. So we take it with a grain of salt here. Billy and Mandy might not literally be set in purgatory. The creators likely intended it as a heightened reality, not a death realm, but thinking of it that way can be fun. One must note how the show ends. The final season didn't conclusively break the formula, it just stopped with more chaos. There was no grand send-off where Grimm is freed or anything. The Underfist spin-off tease implied more adventures to come in this weird world, but that didn't happen due to cancellation. So the series never resolved the supernatural situation. In that sense, it is stuck in time, like Purgatory. Billy and Mandy are eternally 10-year-olds in our memories, Grimm forever shackled. Some fans even extend the Purgatory theory to Maxwell Atom's other related works, like the spin-off Media, weaving a kind of afterlife cartoon universe. That might be overdoing it, but it shows the creativity the show sparked. To cap off the theory section, whether or not you believe Mandy is an elder god, Grimm is atoning for cosmic sins, or Endsville is purgatory, it's undeniable that Billy and Mandy has a richness that invites such wild ideas.
The show provided just enough clues and oddities to light the spark of what if in viewers' minds, and crucially, the creator Maxwell Atoms has generally been supportive of fan interpretations, even the zany ones. He often interacts with fans discussing lore on his blog or social media, sometimes clarifying and other times leaving things open with a wink. For instance, he's clarified basic things like how Fredburger was just a one-off joke that took on a life of its own, not a secret key to the universe or anything, but he's also shared cut concepts like a scrapped cosmic horror musical episode he once envisioned Dedev, proving the show could have gone even deeper into Lovecraftian territory. In a calm voice, let's gently step back now, and remember, these are theories, some just for fun. Whether Mandy is literally a demon, or just a very mean kid, the show works on both levels. The ambiguity is part of what gives the show longevity in our minds. As we drift toward our conclusion, think of the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy as a canvas of night sky. You can connect the stars episodes into whatever constellations theories you fancy. The official picture might just be a pair of kids and a skeleton having bizarre adventures, but fans have drawn monsters and meaning in the spaces between.
Conclusion: a grim adventure with surprising depth. Now we've reached the end of our ultra-long excursion into the world of Billy, Mandy, and the Grim Reaper. It's time to slowly awaken from this gothic bedtime story, or perhaps, if you've drifted off to sleep along the way, the recap will be here for you in the morning. In closing, let's reflect softly on why the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy wasn't really for kids, and why it endures as such a beloved piece of animation lore. At surface level, the show was about gross jokes, silly slapstick, and Halloweenish fun, enough to entertain any child. But as we've uncovered, beneath that surface lay layers of thought, satire of societal norms, parodies of classic literature and film, dashes of philosophy about life and death, and character dynamics that could be oddly poignant. The creator Maxwell Atoms imbued the series with his unique voice, aiming to make us laugh at what scares us. Sahuza. In doing so, he created a cartoon that double-coded its content, bright and boisterous for kids, dark and slyly witty for adults. It challenged its young audience without them even realizing it, normalizing conversations about fear and mortality, and it rewarded older viewers with Easter eggs and deeper inferences. We saw how the network took a chance on this weird concept, and mostly let it flourish, resulting in some of the wildest episodes to hit Cartoon Network in that era. From brain-eating meteors to time-traveling despots, from self-cannibalizing chocolate addicts to underworld courtroom dramas, Billy and Mandy continually proved it wasn't afraid to go there, wherever there might be, no matter how morbid or absurd. And remarkably, it did so while still wearing the mask of a comedy suitable for kids. This delicate balancing act is probably why so many of us recall being both amused and a little spooked by the show in our youth. It had the comfy trappings of a cartoon, but an uncanny undertone that we only fully appreciate now. In exploring major themes like dark humor and existential dread, we recognize that Billy and Mandy was engaging with timeless concepts, just in a whimsical format. The show asked, in its own way, what if death had feelings? What if a child could bully the bogeyman? What if the end of the world was just another goofy day? These are subversive questions for a kids' program, yet by asking them, the series sets itself apart. It's the kids' show that winks at you, letting you know it's in on a big cosmic joke. And maybe that joke is that life and death are not as black and white as other cartoons might paint them. There's humor to be found in darkness, and perhaps comfort too. Many fans, now adults, credit the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy with helping them develop a love for horror comedy, or a healthier outlook on the idea of death. After all, who can fear the Reaper too much once you've seen him do karaoke and get stuck in a bunny suit? We also delved into the psychology of the characters, Mandy's unyielding control, Billy's blissful ignorance, and Grimm's begrudging heart. Analyzing them showed that even the protagonists weren't simple or purely heroic, a nuance that more adult storytelling embraces. It gave the show a slight edge. You weren't always sure if Mandy might not end up being the villain, or if Grimm might finally snap. That tension and unpredictability kept even grown viewers engaged. In a way, Mandy, Billy, and Grimm can represent facets of the human condition, the cynic, the fool, and the inevitability of death, locked in an eternal triangle, learning to live with each other. Quite poetic for a cartoon with fart jokes, isn't it? By revisiting episodes like Little Rock of Horrors, Mandy the Merciless, Chocolate Sailor, and Keeper of the Reaper, we saw concrete examples of the show at its darkest and most inventive. These episodes tackled issues of loneliness, power, temptation, and friendship in totally offbeat ways. They remain fan favorites because they exemplify what made Billy and Mandy special. You could enjoy them as goofy romps, but if you looked closer, they had something to say, or at least a very bold way of not saying something typical. And let's not forget the fan community's contribution, the theories that Mandy is a demon queen, that Grimm is suffering by choice, or that the whole thing is a purgatory scenario. Whether you buy into those or chuckle at them, they demonstrate the depth of engagement the show provoked. People don't usually craft elaborate theories about a show that's shallow. The fact that Billy and Mandy inspired such ideas means it gave us a lot of intriguing puzzle pieces. It respected its audience enough to leave blanks for us to fill with our imagination, which is another reason it appealed beyond just children. Fans are still discussing it, writing about it, even cosplaying as these characters at conventions, because the material has meat, or shall we say bones, to chew on. In this calm retrospective, it's clear that the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy carved out a unique niche. It wasn't for kids in the sense of being juvenile or didactic. Instead, it was for the kid in everyone who enjoys a little scare with their laughter. It occupies that twilight zone of animation that can be appreciated on multiple levels. Watching it as an adult, you might be surprised at jokes you missed, or themes that ring differently now. That's the mark of a well-crafted show. So why wasn't it for kids? Perhaps the cheeky answer is because it was for all ages, merely masquerading as a kid's cartoon. It dared to treat children as intelligent beings, who could handle complex emotions like fear, and simultaneously gave grown-ups something to ponder under the guise of a simple comedy. It's a show that, much like Mandy's brain to the alien meteor, has layers of spice that you only fully taste when you're older. Season you're older. Once you do, you realize how ahead of its time it was. As we close, imagine Grimm's scythe cutting the screen one last time, but instead of something scary, what flows out is a gentle darkness, the comfortable night in which you can sleep soundly, knowing even the Grim Reaper has a rough job, and even the toughest little girl has a soft spot deep, deep down. We hope this long, calming exploration has not only informed you with verified behind-the-scenes tidbits and analysis, but also provided that soft, reflective tone you wanted, the kind you could drift off to. The world of Billy and Mandy is a strangely cozy nightmare, one that we can revisit without fear, now that we've picked it apart by the glow of understanding. In the end, the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy invites us to laugh at the dark, and perhaps that's the most valuable lesson, one not just for kids but for all of us. Sweet dreams, and remember, as Grimm might say, don't fear the Reaper, especially when he's stuck making you peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in your kitchen tomorrow morning. Good night.